Imagine walking into the heart of New York City during the golden age of theatre, where the streets are a blur of ambition and the air feels thick with the scent of desperation and perfume. This is the world of blue grass and Broadway, a story that takes us deep into the white-lighted canyon of the theatre district. At the center of this whirlwind is Godfrey Vandeford, a man who has spent years as a Broadway producer. Godfrey is weary and cynical. He has seen it all, and he knows exactly how the game is played. He views the theatre not necessarily as a temple of art, but as a high-stakes gamble where the currency is talent, beauty, and the ability to manipulate others. For a long time, Godfrey's professional and personal life has been entwined with a starlet named Violet Hawtry. Violet is the quintessential Broadway climber. She didn't start with privilege. She rose from what the book describes as gutter origins, and Godfrey was the one who groomed her, polishing her rough edges until she became a shimmering star. But the problem with grooming a predator is that eventually they learn how to hunt. Violet has become calculating and greedy. She views every relationship as a rung on a ladder. The tension between them reaches a breaking point when Violet attempts to manipulate Godfrey with something called a purple letter, essentially threatening to jump ship to a rival producer if her demands aren't met. Godfrey sees the move for what it is, a betrayal wrapped in glamour. Instead of fighting her on her own terms, he decides to test her. He casts her in a mediocre play called The Purple Slipper, knowing it isn't the vehicle that will launch her to the next level of stardom. He realizes that his connection to Violet is based on artifice and power, not genuine affection. Sensing that her opportunism has finally outweighed her loyalty, Godfrey decides to sever their ties completely. He wants to escape her influence, but in the theatre world, you can't just walk away from a star without a plan. As Godfrey tries to pivot and mount a new production, he encounters Patricia Adair. If Violet is the artificial light of Broadway, Patricia is the steady, honest sunlight of the South. She is a provincial author from Kentucky, sincere and unsophisticated, who has come to New York with a play she wrote out of a desperate need to save her family from poverty. When Godfrey and Patricia meet, it is a collision of two entirely different moral universes. Godfrey is used to people who speak in scripts and hide their true intentions behind a smile. Patricia, on the other hand, is painfully authentic. Their first few meetings, including a luncheon at a high-end restaurant, leave Godfrey feeling unsettled in a way he hasn't felt in years. He is captivated by her vulnerability. He discovers that she is staying at the YYCA, a modest lodging that stands in stark contrast to the lavish estates and hotels he usually frequents. In a moment that signals a major shift in his character, Godfrey does something completely uncharacteristic for a cynical Broadway producer. He visits her at the YYCA to deliver flowers. It is a small gesture, but it shows that he is starting to value genuine human connection over the social performance of his elite circle. However, the process of bringing Patricia's play, The Purple Slipper, to the stage becomes a chaotic battlefield. This is where the story explores the brutal reality of professional production. Patricia views her play as a piece of her soul, but the theatre machine views it as raw material to be shaped, cut, and often mutilated. Godfrey finds himself in the difficult position of trying to protect Patricia's artistic vision while dealing with the aggressive demands of the industry. Enter William Rooney, the director. Rooney is described as a machine gun of a man, a brutal disciplinarian who doesn't care about the author's original intent. He spends his rehearsals pepping up the dialogue, stripping away the quiet sincerity of Patricia's southern voice and replacing it with the loud, fast-paced rhythms of Broadway. Then there is Maisie Villaines, a vaudeville star whose negotiations are as aggressive as Rooney's directing. Patricia is overwhelmed. She watches as her work is dismantled and reconstructed into something she barely recognizes. Adding to the pressure is the lingering presence of Violet Hawtry. Violet is still maneuvering around Godfrey's social circle, trying to maintain her grip on the production and her status. The tension peaks during a dress rehearsal, which becomes a pressure cooker of emotion. Violet, volatile and feeling the shift in power, erupts in a public confrontation. She doesn't just argue about the play, she attacks Patricia personally, insulting her provincialism and accusing Godfrey of exploiting Patricia's work. The vitriol is too much for Patricia. She is a woman of gentle values thrust into a world of sharks. Overwhelmed by the cruelty and the predatory nature of the industry, Patricia flees the theatre in tears. She leaves behind a cryptic note that sends Godfrey into a panic, sparking fears that she might commit suicide. For Godfrey, this is the moment of truth. He realizes that the tissue paper world of Broadway, with all its fake smiles and fragile egos, has nearly destroyed the one thing in his life that was actually real. In the aftermath of this crisis, the different characters find their resolutions. Violet Hawtry, ever the strategist, sees the chaos as an opportunity. Rather than apologizing or trying to fix the wreckage, she seizes the moment to abandon the production entirely. She secures a lucrative role in a rival show called The Rosy Posy Girl, proving that her only true loyalty is to her own ambition. She exits the story as she entered it, chasing the brightest light and the biggest paycheck. Godfrey and Patricia, however, find a different path. They retreat from the noise of the city to a beach, where they have a long overdue reconciliation. This scene is the emotional heart of the book. They discuss their differing moralities, contrasting the broad, flexible standards of Broadway with the narrow, traditional values of Patricia's Kentucky home. Godfrey realizes that he doesn't want to live in the white-lighted canyon anymore. He wants the stability and sincerity that Patricia represents. They decide to marry, but they choose to do it under the stricter standards of her hometown, wanting to protect their private lives from the prying eyes and superficial judgments of the New York public. The play, The Purple Slipper, eventually opens to massive success. It is a bit of a paradox. The very machine that tried to mutilate the art ended up creating a hit. But for Godfrey and Patricia, the success of the play is secondary to the success of their relationship. The story concludes on a hopeful, adventurous note, with the couple planning a trip to the Klondike, leaving the artifice of Broadway behind for a new adventure together. Looking back at the story, there are several layers that make this more than just a simple romance. One of the most striking elements is the motif of the color purple. Purple is often associated with royalty and luxury, but in this book, it represents the deceptive allure of Broadway. From the title of the play to the purple letter Violet uses to manipulate Godfrey, the color symbolizes a kind of predatory glamour. It is the color of the mask that people wear to hide their greed or their insecurity. This ties into the central conflict of authenticity versus artifice. The book describes the theater industry as a tissue paper world. Tissue paper is thin, fragile, and easily torn. It is a metaphor for the superficiality of the Broadway social scene, where reputations are built on whispers and careers can vanish overnight. However, the story suggests that even in a world made of tissue paper, there can be heroic fiber. That fiber is found in genuine human emotion and the courage to be sincere in a room full of actors. We see this transformation most clearly in the way the book handles the physical objects of the story. There is the poignant detail about heirloom dresses being altered into stage costumes. This mirrors the characters' own journeys. Just as a family dress is cut and sewn into something that looks good under spotlights but loses its original history, the characters who enter the Broadway machine often lose their innocence. Patricia almost loses herself to the process, and Godfrey had long ago traded his sincerity for cynicism. The resolution of the plot is satisfying because it doesn't just give us a happy ending. It gives us a moral realignment. Godfrey doesn't just find a wife, he finds a way to stop playing the game. By choosing Patricia's narrow standards over Broadway's broad ones, he is choosing truth over performance. Bluegrass and Broadway is a study of the cost of ambition. Violet Hawtry is the warning label for what happens when ambition is decoupled from empathy. She ends up successful, but she is fundamentally alone, moving from one contract to the next. Patricia and Godfrey, conversely, find success not through manipulation, but through a shared commitment to something real. The journey from the bluegrass of Kentucky to the lights of Broadway and back again shows that while the world of artifice can be dazzling, it is the quiet, provincial truths that actually sustain a person.